by those guys. Well, Congress they keep kicking the can down the road. They're voting today for yet another continuing resolution. You know those CRs that keep the government open temporarily? Now, this new stopgap would keep our government running until the money would run out, and that's November 21st. And with the nation's debt spiraling out of control, what needs to be done this time around, many say, is maybe make a stand. Joining me to discuss, Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman Gaetz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
I hate saying the term kick the can down the road. You guys have been doing it for, I don't know, I've lost track. How many CRs have there been? Do you know?
Dozens. I didn't vote for bad continuing resolutions when the Republicans ran this place, and I'm sure not voting for them when Democrats run this place. You know, there has been an ability for far too many in Congress to say, well, we're not raising taxes, and so we're really being fiscally responsible. But your informed viewers know that when we don't raise taxes, but we raise spending, we suck more than $1 trillion out of the American economy because we go and sell federal bonds that then that money is not being used to build businesses, to open new branch offices, and to invest in wages for the American worker. So this is a bad day for Washington, a bad day for the country, and it's unfortunate that you're right. This has become business as usual, and I won't stand for it.
But it's always promoted, whether it's the mainstream media or the financial press, as good news that we've kept the government open, even though, ironically, the last time it was closed for a long period of time, the stock market took off like a rocket.
Well, the only reason why average Americans don't feel a daily impact from our fiscal irresponsibility in Washington is because the dollar remains the global reserve currency. But if we keep doing this over and over again, if it becomes the new normal where we're sucking $1 trillion out of the economy, then we risk at some point the dollar not being the global reserve currency. And at that time, there won't be like some linear series of changes. We will fall off of a fiscal cliff, and we'll have to do the type of austerity that would really be intensely harmful to American families. That's why we should be making reforms now to the drivers of our debt, and that means reforming entitlements. I know it's not popular, but if we don't do it, we will lose the greatness of this country, and we'll do it on our watch, which would be devastating.
Is there any way to honestly get that done, let's say without term limits? I mean, as long as politicians have a reason to stay in D.C., and the longer they stay there, the more power they wield. It just feels like the political will itself, no matter what I hear on the stump, never materializes once you guys are sworn in, yourself notwithstanding.
When I go to town halls, I ask folks to raise their hand if they support a balanced budget amendment and term limits. Almost all of them do. Then I ask them to keep their hand up if they believe that Congress will ever impose those things on itself, and every hand in the room always goes down. But our brilliant founders envisioned a circumstance like this where Washington would so depart from our principles that the states would have to join together in a convention of the states. I'm proud that when I was in the Florida legislature, I was one of the sponsors to put the state of Florida into a constitutional convention so that we could have a balanced budget amendment and term limits. You're right. Those two things go together, and only the states will drive those reforms.
Ironically, they're talking about Republicans now keeping their, keeping the leadership, which a lot of them, when they lose that leadership, they usually leave Washington, D.C., so it's gone the other way. Real quick, Congressman, Nancy Pelosi this morning was talking about Democrats investigating, legislating, of course, talking about Corey Lewandowski in that hearing. You were there. What do you make of it? Because it looked like a farce from the very beginning.
Well, to borrow my friend Greg Jarrett's line, if the Lewandowski hearing was the maiden voyage for impeachment, I think the boat burned and sank before it even left the harbor. We will see that public support for impeachment will actually be lower after the Lewandowski hearing. And I think that there are reasonable Democrats that are starting to speak up more and more. Folks like my friend Jared Huffman from New Jersey who've stood up and said, gee, we need to be focused on things that actually impact the lives of the American people, like infrastructure and prescription drug prices. So even within the Democratic caucus, they have formed a circular firing squad where the radical left is taking incoming from more moderate Democrats who would actually like to see us get to work.
Yeah, and the American public was on the pier watching that boat as it caught fire and sank in that debacle. And I think you're right. The public opinion polls say there's no appetite for this. Maybe we won't have to see it again. But we look forward to seeing you again. Congressman, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.